It's been a long time since we got something truly new from the Prince of Persia franchise. This is a game series that for many of us will be an iconic classic. However, it has been over 13 years since we had a last new real addition in the series with Forgotten Sands back in 2010, and of course the very original that dates all the way back to 1989. Well, when we heard that Prince of Persia is coming back, it might be an understatement to say that we're excited. These are games from our past that now hold a solid place in our nostalgia. So when we were asked to get hands-on by Ubisoft to try out Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown, you know we had to go and see what the game is saying, so we sent Vestmore to test the game out for us. So big thank you to Ubisoft, and let's get into it with what is Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown and our impressions having played it. But make sure to hit that like button down below if you enjoy these previews from us, and subscribe so you don't miss out on all the gaming updates that we have for you here on the channel. Firstly, as you may already know, Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown is going in a slightly different direction than the later titles of the series, as it's more of an action-adventure platformer in a Metroidvania almost style of game this time. So think of it more like a modern take on the roots of the series with games like The Shadow and the Flame as well as the very original. To be completely honest, for me the Sands of Time trilogy is where my hype and fandom for the series comes from. So while I have nothing against a platforming Metroidvania, I would really have loved for them to go more in that direction, or even a direction around Prince of Persia 2008 with its open world environments and unique direction. But do remember, the Sands of Time remake is on the way for us in the future, so think of The Lost Crown as a warm-up for the series after its long hiatus. And then in the future we can get our hands on the highly anticipated Sands of Time remake. But since Vestmore is a big fan of Metroidvanias, you guys are going to get two different perspectives here for this new game. For the game itself, it definitely takes inspiration from the ancient era of Persia as well as mythology in general, making it quite an interesting mix of the two, and it is presented in an almost comic book art style. We'll be following Sargon, a young and ruthless warrior who belongs to an elite bodyguard unit called the Immortals. We're tasked by the Queen of Persia to rescue the prince, who at this time is a young boy that's been abducted. From here we go off on an adventure where we must go to Mount Kaf and encounter a godlike being that has control over time. Long story short, we gain new temporal powers and must fight our way through undead monsters and various mythological creatures and beasts, and even some former allies to break the curse and save the prince. The game is currently in active development, but the release date is planned to target early 2024 with January the 18th as the current date. For platforms, we are looking at Xbox Series X and S, Xbox One, PS4 and PS5 as well as PC. So now you have the general rundown of what the game is, let's go over our impressions having actually played it. But first we should touch on a few points that we can see people being potentially upset over. Of course, this is quite a different game than what fans of the series from the Sands of Time era would expect. But if you're more of an OG fan of the original Metroidvania style of games, then it's going to be your thing. But that being said, the art style, the main character's style, and the music, at least from the trailer, definitely wasn't what people were expecting, so we are aware of these things. However, we love to focus on what makes games actually good at their core, which is the gameplay, and Vestmore really enjoyed his time having actually played it. With Ubisoft knowing what makes a good side-scrolling platformer series with things like Rayman under their belt, we think if you like this style of game, you're in for a treat. The game was developed around 4 core principles that we'll go through: the narration, the combat, the exploration, and the parkour. So let's go through each of these and how we feel in regards to these points. The platforming felt very fluid and was easy to initially understand and get to grips with. We felt it was easy to pick up and hard to master, so skilled players can definitely do some impressive maneuvers. You can chain together plenty of moves to deal with enemies in creative ways, as you have access to slides, jumps, wall jumps, air dashes, and more, so we felt that this was a highlight. While we were playing, we also had access to abilities that you would normally get later on, so we got a more rounded feel of the game. Vest felt that speedrunners could really enjoy this one, as a lot of thought has gone into the movement specifically. One cool move was the teleportation recall ability that lets you save the state of your character and then recall to it later on, so some pretty cool maneuvers could be pulled off with things like this. The game also had sequences of pure platform challenges similar to games like Celeste. They really expected you and rewarded you for having a very tight understanding of the movement options available to you, and you did have to be very fast and precise. enemies. This was a nice thing that mixed up the different sections of the game between defeating enemies. And speaking of enemies, let's talk about the combat. Again, this felt very fluid and there was a good variety of enemies that required very different approaches to beat them effectively. The game basically encourages you not to just repeat the same tactic on every single enemy, as some of them have different defense mechanisms like super armor, active hurt boxes, or even parries which can catch you off guard. So you did have to pay attention when fighting these different enemy types to learn how to defeat them. Your bread and butter moves in combat come in the form of your twin blades that you can use to do directional attacks, as well as parries that also work on projectiles. You also have a bow for quicker ranged attacks, and a chakram for a wall bouncing boomerang style attack option. While attacking, you will build up a meter that lets you unleash even more powerful abilities, and there's an amulet system that essentially acts as your gear, which will let you augment different aspects of your playstyle. They all do different things. Some of them let you regen health after doing a parry, others gave you increased airborne attack, and some even added whole new abilities, such as Vestmord's favorite, which was the spot dodge, where if an enemy hit you while you were doing the dodge, you would instantly teleport behind them and strike them in the back. We were especially impressed that most of your kit was still useful in the boss battles, with parrying being a very strong option if you get good at timing it. Next, let's touch on exploration. In the version of the game that we played, exploration was expectedly limited, as certain areas were blocked off to us as it's an early version of the game. But there were still secrets to find and areas to explore as you went along. Some side paths or alternative routes often led to bonuses like extra currency that's used to upgrade your gear, or even chests with whole new items inside. We did see a few varying biomes, and each one had its own unique enemy types and challenges, which was a nice touch. And while we can't show the map, we can say that the whole thing is one interconnected area with different shortcuts and fast travel points, which we love to see when they add fast travel points in these games. For the narrative of the game, it's definitely a different take on the original series, but it does have its own charm once you get into it. Vestmord really enjoyed the main character Sargon and felt he was basically cut straight out of an anime, with him striving to prove himself to his peers and getting stronger along the way. Personally, I would have loved a character more akin to the Sands of Time trilogy with the unnamed prince, but each to their own. We didn't see too much of the dynamic between these characters, and so it did leave us wanting to see how that will pan out later, but it was fun to see the interactions between some of the bosses, and the cutscenes were particularly cool, as if they were something straight up out of a superhero movie. There's plenty of Persian folklore and mythology present, from the save game points to varying beasts that you fight along the way. It did feel like the game explores many interesting routes and motifs that aren't often explored in other titles. And so, that's pretty much our rundown of Prince of Persia: The Lost Crown. If you enjoy these previews from us, hit that like button down below. It's for the YouTube algorithm, but it really helps. Thank you so much. Make sure to subscribe so you stay up to date on all things gaming here on the channel, and the two videos on screen now, we think you'll really enjoy if you did enjoy this one. You don't have to watch them if you don't want to, but if you did like this video, you're probably going to like these ones too. And then tell us what you think after watching in the comments down below.